Everyone, Richard Carlton here. How are you today? We are here to discuss a really neat development in the world of FM Starting Point, which is our free FileMaker CRM. And my camera here is shaking a little bit. We continue to refine the process here as we get all this going. But I am here joined today with Nathan Allen. I'm going to briefly switch over here and give you an idea of what we're up to today. So we are going to be talking about the QuickBooks pre-built integration with the FileMaker CRM or the free FileMaker CRM, which is FM Starting Point. So this is very exciting to us, and we wanted to start walking people through the idea of what does this take to do this? What does it take to roll this out? And it's been a process for me because for the last X number of years, 20 years or whatever, I have worked with customers, my team has worked with customers to roll out QuickBooks into FileMaker kind of on a case-by-case basis, a customer-by-customer basis, but we wanted to cut the corner and make life a lot easier. And so what the issue turns out to be is that it's to save the work, so we don't have to redo the work every time we do the project. We can recycle the work. It makes lots of sense. Anyway, so we're still making adjustments in here. Nathan Allen is here with us. He may or may not be speaking today. Largely today is an overview of the process. Then we continue the conversation tomorrow. These videos will all be recorded and made available as part of kind of a little training package that goes into this. So if I move forward in my slideshow here, what are the benefits of integrating this technology? And so the benefits primarily revolve around the idea of not having to build the code that's going to into FileMaker that's going to talk to QuickBooks every time. That's really kind of an important idea. We don't want to do that. It's a lot of work, and if we could save ourselves once again rebuilding the wheel. Why did we build Starting Point in the first place? Because we got tired of rebuilding a CRM every time a customer needed it. It's about half of the customer projects have some sort of CRM hook to it. So we got tired of doing that, and then we built training around it. And before long, it kind of became this large project or effort. So the other issue, of course, is the scenario one is, of course, you pay someone to do it the old-fashioned way, and it takes a minimum of 50 hours. I've had developers who are doing it a lot, like over and over and over again. They will do it probably in 20 to 30 hours, but a big chunk of that time is educating the customer on what this really means. And, and to use QuickBooks, you have to enforce some very specific business processes. In FileMaker, you can kind of do whatever you want. It's a wide open range. There's no considerations about what the rules are. If you want to make FileMaker violate federal rules in terms of taxes or do this or do that, there's nothing that makes FileMaker behave correctly or incorrectly. It's up to you or the developer to do that, or developer that you might hire, right? And so QuickBooks doesn't operate that way. QuickBooks is like this accounting package, and when it calculates sales tax, it's kind of incontrovertible. You don't tell it how to calculate sales tax for the most part. It does it, and then it's part of it is it helps you report that to the government in whatever jurisdiction you're in, and that way the government has a high degree of trust in QuickBooks. And so that's kind of what this is about. So if you already have QuickBooks, it's one conversation. If you already have FileMaker, that's a conversation. If you have both, but they've never been brought together, then that's kind of where we have to kind of force you to be a little bit more stringent about your business processes. So the idea is that we're going to cut out about 90% of the coding. It doesn't mean it's a zero effort installation. I think that's misleading. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So real quick, welcome to fmtraining.tv. This is where we do frequently we call this the coach's corner, but this is where we are coaching. We're teaching people how to use the FileMaker platform. We're teaching them how to take advantage of all the additional capabilities of the platform, how to bring innovation to their organization. When your business is in a rut, when things aren't going well for you, when you're spending lots of time and frankly, you kind of suffer, you have a pain point in your organization. If you're working 12 hours a day and you're not getting ahead, that's really where FileMaker comes in. It's an innovation tool, allows you to innovate and make things better in your organization to solve problems. And that makes everyone much happier. You save money, it's pretty obvious to people who use FileMaker. If you've never used FileMaker before, then feel free to ask questions about that as we go. Now, if you want to ask questions, please come over here and ask questions. And of course, we have people already in the webinar, but I want to encourage you that you ask questions in here. Right now, I can look at it and I'm not seeing any questions, but definitely ask them as we go along. You just type them in there at the bottom. They will appear in real time to everyone. I can respond to them on video. So this is live video. It's not edited. So it's all the pressure. Some FileMaker consultants hate this. They really do, because they feel like they have to answer the questions perfectly correctly. And generally we try to do that, but it's presenting in front of people is always a trick. So who is RCC? What is RCC? RCC is basically a top shelf FileMaker consultancy. That in fancy words means that we've been in business for a very, very long time. And so we have about 32 engineers in the FileMaker platform, or in our company specifically. We have offices in California, in Nevada, in Texas, and we have a whole bunch of engineers that work remotely. So they are all over the place. Basically, we are a consultancy, but a huge chunk of our company revolves around getting Starting Point out the door, maintaining it frankly, as a community resource. It's effectively a free application. We don't charge for it. All you have to do is put your information in and we mail you a copy of it, and you can get fresh updated copies all the time. In fact, you could go to fmstartingpoint.com, as you see in the link, the third one down there below, and you can see that you'll be able to download Starting Point 7. We have a complete training package. We updated this for FileMaker 18. We have the updated course training for FileMaker 18. We also are working on the FileMaker 18 book. It's correct that we don't have an 18 book up there yet. That tends to lag about 30 days behind. So moving along. So these are the personas of the people that use the FileMaker platform. And so what you have is business owners. They want return on investment. They're not necessarily technical. You have brand new developers who are people who generally are just kind of learning what the heck is a relationship. If you're trying to figure out what a relationship is, what a one-to-many is, that kind of thing, you're basically a new developer. There are this intermediate group of people which are not brand new developers, and they're not really senior ninja people. I hear this all the time. I've used FileMaker for 20 years. And what ends up happening is that they, because they've been using it for 20 years, they consider themselves a senior developer. The rub is, though, is that they learned as much as they needed to do in terms of, building relationships and basic things like that. They built reports. They were successful. And so they never really progressed past the intermediate stage, but they've been doing the same job for 20 years. And so they consider themselves a senior engineer, or a senior developer. I just want to identify, at least in our terminology, that a senior developer, they're certified. Second, they can code probably, or are very familiar with another, I don't want to say programming language, but another syntax of code. So PHP is another code, Ajax, JSON, things like JSON is a file format more than anything else. You can also, a lot of these people can write bits of SQL or a lot of SQL. So if you can start to do those types of things, you are a senior ninja. So what is this webinar all about? Well, this webinar is primarily for going to be your higher end folks. And so basically we have the junior developers. If you want to learn from this webinar, that's great. If you're an intermediate developer, you probably are on the edge of being able to do this. You probably need to generate some more skills or learn some more, but that's kind of what these webinars are about. Plus you could always ask questions from other people. But this webinar primarily is for the business owners who want to take advantage of this because they're driving this need. And then the senior ninjas have to build this. So to be very clear about this, obviously we're using a plugin, so we don't make all the calls directly. A lot of the conversation is through the plugin, but once again, that's kind of a benchmark. If you can write an API to talk to something, then you're ready to have this kind of conversation about this product. So what is this? Once again, this is us pre-building the code into FM Starting Point, which is a free CRM, which means that basically we've done about 90% of the work for you. The last 10% is probably senior level work. Additionally, you do have to purchase obviously QuickBooks online, and you also need to have worked with this plugin from FM Connector. So we'll talk about that briefly. So what does it take to do this? And we're just going to stay on this slide just briefly here. You have to understand your business workflow. Sometimes we talk to customers and they are ad hocing their business together. Every day is a little different, partly because they haven't written anything down. They may have 5 or 10 employees or more employees. Typically, as they get bigger, somewhere along the line, they start to document their workflow, their processes. But, what are the teams within your organization? Who creates the invoices in the organization? Are the salespeople creating the invoices, and who does the fulfillment? You should be able to answer these questions rapid fire. Who collects the money? Who processes the money? If you have 2 or 3 employees, then this group of 3 people does probably all of this, right? You might have one of the 3 as a financial accounting person, but they probably do other jobs. If it's a really small company, they probably do more than just that. And so the idea is, who are the people that are making the business work? And then, so that's the first set of things you need to know. The second conversation you need to know is, what did we pre-build into FM Starting Point? We took certain assumptions, certain most common business scenarios that you're going to see, and we integrated that. We built that into FM Starting Point, so it's ready to go kind of out of the box. Now, once again, out of the box means that you still have to understand all this stuff, and you have to understand the rules. So we've set up some certain rules as to how FileMaker interacts with QuickBooks, certain business workflow. You have to decide if that workflow is right for you. And if you need to change it, then that's more work that you, as a senior person, or you have to hire a senior person, they have to do that. But again, we've cut about 90% out of this. So whatever your investment in, it's going to be a fraction of the size it would have been otherwise, if that makes sense. So, it's Starting Point, what do we build in? Sales teams interact, we make the assumption that you have a sales person or team, they interact with customers and they create invoices. We also make the assumption that the sales team doesn't touch the money. You get to larger organizational sizes. RCC finally has kind of a dedicated licensing person. They're a sales kind of person. We don't want that person to touch the money. That person is a very an extrovert kind of personality, and the issue is that we don't want them worried about money, because frankly, their specialties is talking to people and helping customers understand what they need. And math is not his specialty, right? It's just kind of the way that is. You very rarely find someone who can do everything. And so that's why we have accounting people. So the salesperson in this model is going to do the orders. They can finalize orders. They create the invoices. They send the invoice to the customer. The customer pays. The money comes back. And the money doesn't go to the salesperson. It goes to a financial/accounting person. The salesperson, keep in mind, doesn't care about what software they use. They only care that it's easy to use and it works, right? When we deal with a finance and accounting team, as a general rule, they're not your first line of interaction with customers. In fact, in our organization, customers never interact with the finance and accounting people unless there's some sort of snag with a payment, or a check was lost in the mail, or whatever happens. So you have accounting folks in an organization that probably are not your most personable people, the people that you want to take out to dinner and see a movie with. And I'm not talking down to if you're a finance and accounting person, but that you're not a salesperson. So the other thing is that these people collect the money. You trust them with a very high degree of trust, more than most people, because they have the money to the corporation. For example, at FileMaker Incorporated, I have talked to the financial people there. They normally never talk to them, but if you interact with them like we do, and we're sending, checks back and forth for 10 grand and 20 grand, things like this go whizzing back and forth, primarily uphill to them. They very rarely send me a check. Then, you start to learn who these people are. And these people at FileMaker, for example, are in charge of millions of dollars. At my company, it's not a trivial amount of money. Most companies, these are the people that manage the bank accounts, and they have the access code to the bank accounts. And these people love standards. They love uniformity, which means they love QuickBooks. They don't want you to build your own solution in FileMaker that replaces QuickBooks. They want to use QuickBooks because these financial people deal with tax people, they deal with auditors. They want standards, they want consistency, they want predictability. They love QuickBooks. And so the salespeople don't care what they use as long as they make a sale. The accounting people love to use QuickBooks. And so the idea is that you have to combine both of these groups of people, and that's where all this comes in. So the idea is that your sales team is going to manage the orders and within FileMaker, and the finance team primarily hangs out in QuickBooks. So as a general rule, and I'm saying this loosely, the salespeople only hang out in FileMaker. That is more of a concrete statement. The finance accounting people mostly hang out in QuickBooks. That's kind of our assumption. Most accounting teams will also have one, like it open on two screens. I'll have FileMaker one screen and QuickBooks on the other screen, which is good. They can do that. That's fine. But that's kind of, their preferred tool. So then if I go forward here, we notice that we can, invoices are created in FileMaker and they synchronize to QuickBooks in a highly controlled manner. This is the critical thing to understand. Remember, your sales team, listen, I've got a sales guy, he goes on vacation for 2 weeks and he forgets about half of the processes that we set up for him. And I'm not picking on him. What I've seen from salespeople in general is that there are some exceptionally sharp salespeople, but there are the cookie cutter type salespeople that are out there. And if for them, it's about closing the deal, doing the deal, shaking the hand, making it final. That's what they live for. And so for them, the process is like how they put it into FileMaker might vary, and they might not even really care that there's variations in it, right? Because as far as they're concerned, FileMaker is it, any software they have to do is mostly in the way of them getting on the phone and cutting a deal with a person. And so the idea is that we are going to force everyone to do this process in a highly controlled manner. And that's a big part of the upfront conversation to understand this. So to make all this work, to get yourself going, first you had to understand your organization, understand some of the things I've just told you about, the assumptions that we make, that the invoicing side and the accounts payable or the accounts finance side are two sides of the organization. If it's the same person, that's fine. But in a lot of places, it's more than one person. And so to make this work, we put all the code in, but you still need the QuickBooks plugin. The QuickBooks plugins from Productive Computing Incorporated, or PCI, we refer to them. Sometimes you'll hear me call them the evil twins. And these are two brothers that own the company, and they're similar age to me. And in the old days, they actually looked damn near identical. And as they got older, their looks start to change a little bit. But it used to be 10 years ago, I couldn't tell them apart, literally. So they make a great product. To use their product, you have to put all this coding into your FileMaker solution. Well, that's where we've cut the corner and saved this problem. So you're going to obviously need to have FileMaker licenses. You're going to need a license from Productive Computing. Obviously, you're going to need a QuickBooks Online subscription. Now, the initial version of this product is a QuickBooks Online integration. Maybe down the road, we do QuickBooks Desktop. Some people like QuickBooks Desktop. The logic and the thinking and the process of it are very similar, but it's a different product. There's different code, and it's a lot more to QA or to quality check or test, if that makes sense. So we started with QuickBooks Online. That's obviously the product that QuickBooks is trying to push people towards in a strategic sense. I think so, without any question. It has certain limitations the desktop version doesn't have. The cool part about QuickBooks Online is that it works equally well with Mac and Windows. And the QuickBooks Desktop, once again, for the last literally 20 plus years, has always been a Windows only application. So if you're currently QuickBooks Desktop and you're interested in this, drop us an email and we'll try to keep you apprised of what we do in terms of that space. Or you can probably even taking starting point 7 and adapting it to the desktop version would still save a lot of time, because we've worked it all out, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So there's a whole setup and installation process that goes on here. A big chunk of this and this is where I wish I had Nathan around, right? So we'll make sure we bring Nathan back tomorrow. He's here. I can hear Nathan. The trick with Nathan is that we're having some wiring issues with getting him attached to the broadcast. But the idea is that there are accounts within QuickBooks, and then there are accounts in Starting Point. An account in Starting Point means an organization. It's not a person, it's an organization as a general rule. Accounts in QuickBooks means something totally different. It's basically one little silo where you move money in and out of. And as you set up QuickBooks, you set up about 5 or 6 of these things, and you have to designate them and identify them. Now, there's quite a few more of them in QuickBooks. In fact, when we set this up, we're doing the basic setup for you to create invoices in FileMaker, push them up to QuickBooks, payments happen on that side, and then FileMaker gets notified that the payments come back down. That's the most common scenario, because people want to manage the money with QuickBooks, but they want to manage the rest of the company with FileMaker. It's a real benefit. And so this is one of those deals where you got to be careful. In fact, I was working through Nathan with this over the last 3 months, and I'm like, oh, you mean that there's different, accounts in QuickBooks means something totally different, and it does. So these are all the accounts that you have to set up. We also have some flow charts that we'll provide to you that walk you through it. Additionally, if you want to customize it, of course, all the documentation from Productive Computing, because really at the end of the day, it's their product. We just wired their product into Starting Point, so you don't really have to pay too much to do that, right? So the idea is that you have to set up these accounts, and that kind of gets us to this initial wrapping up stage right here, questions and answers. And I want to make sure people ask the questions about this. So what we have as part of this process, and we will lay this out in more detail tomorrow, but these are the flow charts that we created here. These are flow charts that are going to be part of the process, but it's understanding the process of setting up, and it's, you can't really see it too well here, but this, you're setting up the, step 1, step 2, all the way through setting up all the accounts. We have a process of, what I need to do is kind of see if I can view this in actual size. So there's that one in actual size. There's this one right here. If I view actual size, so once again, we will give these to you, but we have basically gone through the process of identifying how we sync things up to QuickBooks and what goes on with that. And then where we could see, because obviously once you sync it to QuickBooks, it kind of locks the invoice, right? You can't make a lot of changes to it. So there's times where you don't want to push up to QuickBooks. Then there's times when you do push it up, but it's kind of locked, because once it's up in QuickBooks and you make a change on your end, QuickBooks won't know about the change. So we've gone through the entire process, but the short version of this is that there's an entire conversation that goes around. You create the invoice on the FileMaker side, you push it up to QuickBooks, then they collect the payments, and those payments are totaled together. And then downhill back at FileMaker, you can see the amount due, right? Makes sense. That's what we bring back to FileMaker, so you can see how much it's paid. So it's important that you have to synchronize the customer information up to who they are. You have to also synchronize the products up to QuickBooks. So that's part of these flow chart and these diagrams. And this has all been scripted. These diagrams explain what the scripts already do. The scripts are highly documented. And so once again, if you have a FileMaker developer and they're fairly senior, then they will be able to tear this apart lickety split. If you are an intermediate developer, you're going to cut your teeth on this. It'll be fun. If you need help, reach out to us or find someone who is a QuickBooks expert in the FileMaker platform. So we have some questions? No questions? Oh, there's a question. Glazed over, my brain melted down. Yeah. So the glazing down, the brain melting down part, I think that, okay, so to be clear about what happened with me, I went through the whole thing you did. For me to understand what happened today, it took me about 3 times sitting down, going through it to get my head wrapped around it. The critical part to understand, and I think you have to identify this with your business, is these pieces back here. So you have your team. What do they do, right? Do you have a separate sales or invoicing person, right? Maybe this person doesn't do sales. They just do process orders and stuff. Is that person different than the finance accounting, right? A lot of places that is the case. If it's the same person, then that's fine. They can run both at the same time. The trick with QuickBooks here is to not do double entry. You don't want the salesperson to create an invoice, then grab a piece of paper, a PDF, and send it to the accounting person, then have them key it all in, probably wrong. And then there's this discrepancy between the two. It's a data entry error prevention system. It's a lot of different things that make this work. So understanding your business, then understand what we try to do. We try to identify, this workflow that says at the end of the day, the salespeople or the order taker person or whoever this is going to create the invoices in FileMaker. The invoice gets transferred into QuickBooks, payment is received, and then FileMaker is notified that its payment's been received. It knows about that. It says paid, right? Or how much is left due. And then at whatever the fulfillment process is for that order can occur. We talk to people who are field reps who are repairing cars, and they would want to have that feedback that they can repair the car. Things are paid for, things are approved. We got people who are plumbers, electricians. We got marketing individuals who may be doing invoice, and then it's maybe a product or a service that they fulfill, but there's typically some sort of fulfillment once the payment occurs, right? And maybe that's not part of FileMaker at all. That's fine. But the idea was that, you create the invoice, push to QuickBooks. Then once the payment's received, then FileMaker QuickBooks is the first to know about it, right? Because the accounting people are putting the payment into QuickBooks. And then there's a sync that goes on, and then FileMaker is notified that, hey, this is done. It's ready to go. And so that's what we've done. So I know it's a lot to suck in and to manage. But if you are in business and you're using QuickBooks, you've already had to address this one way or the other. Now, maybe you're a sole proprietor and you're kind of fumbling through and doing the minimums you need to do with QuickBooks. If you're just one person doing this stuff, then maybe you don't need this for yourself. But if you get to an organizational size of 5-10 people, then you're starting to look at all this happening for you. And the idea, of course, is that we're not inventing anything new here. We just it's like the CRM. FM Starting Point was not the first CRM. It won't be the last CRM, but it happens to be the most cost-effective CRM, probably one of the most cost-effective ones in the world, right? In terms of flexibility and its price. Of course, you have to buy FileMaker to get it. And FileMaker, you can argue that it's cheap or expensive or whatever you want to say about it. But in terms of the CRM itself, the software that we built, it's like one of the best deals on the planet. We've taken QuickBooks integration, which has already been out there, and we've just made it easier. We've cut the corner for you. And so this is part of Starting Point 7. If you're a junior developer, I'm sure your head has exploded and left like it melted over here. Also, speaking of which, for those of you who I see now and I maybe don't talk to again, FileMaker Developer Conference is going to be an exciting year this year. I think it's going to be bigger than anyone thinks it could be. I really do. I don't swear to it. Don't take it to the bank. But if you want to come to a developer conference and have your brain blown, I think this is the year to do it. I really do. And so if you want to come this year, I suggest you come. I will be there all 3 days. You can find me. In fact, I will have fresh copies of our FileMaker 18 book, and those will be free to you if you want. If you want to come and hang out and ask questions and talk to us about things, I will be there with about 5 or 6 of my engineers will be there, staff. And so we'll be happy to do that. So how much is the PCI plugin? I don't know if Nathan's here or not. I would just go to the PCI, the Productive Computing website, and check on that. It depends on how you buy it. And if it's, I don't know if it's the size of the group or the size of the team. That's actually a good question. I should know. In the general sense of things, it's getting the FileMaker stuff normally. Okay, normally what happens is people always say, how much is FileMaker? And what they don't realize is that when you buy the license for the software, that cost is trivial compared to the amount of cost of the labor of getting the stuff built, the code, having someone help you build the code. So if you're going to write it yourself and your time is not of any measurable value, then yeah, I guess the license would be so would you say it was 200 for 200 for a single user, and then how much for a group of people? So it's an annual subscription. So it's 200 for an individual, or $450, unlimited organizational size, and that's an annual subscription. All right, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.